Carr. I'm the president and CEO of Inspire Veterinary Partners. We are an owner and operator of veterinary hospitals across the U.S. We experienced our IPO in August of this year, so we're freshly out. We own 14 hospitals across the United States. And I'll talk a little bit about our team and what we're doing and what the growth strategy is, and also give a little background on the industry and some consolidation that's been underway for a number of years now and how we fit into that, but also some differentiated ways in which we're taking advantage of some different approaches toward consolidating in the veterinary space. So within the United States, veterinary consolidation of privately owned veterinary hospitals has been underway for a little more than a decade now. And we have a number of groups of various sizes that have engaged in buying independently owned hospitals and rolling them into groups, and often with the purpose of recapping that group and reselling, taking the entire portfolio and in 2 to 5 years recapitalizing. There are a number of groups that are doing this to scale and to size that have now recapped a few times within their history. Some have been glommed, and we've seen some consolidation of groups within groups. Then we have some family-owned private corporations in the form of Mars, which is an organization that I come from. And a little bit about my background and sort of what brings me to Inspire. The most recent 10 years of my career has been in the veterinary medicine profession, not as a clinician, but as a business person. You would not want me operating on your pet or doing a spay or neuter. But I've worked alongside clinicians for the last handful of years, operated at scale during my time with Mars, which is the largest holder of veterinary hospitals in the US. They do quite a bit on the services side as well as the nutrition side. And I got a chance to see a profession that is very mission-driven, very principle-oriented. It's full of clinicians that believe in what they do. They care for the pets they serve. And they come out of school with a ton of knowledge and a ton of principled, mission-driven desire to do well. They also have a lot of debt, and they have a desire to earn. And there's some upside-down component of that compared to their human counterparts. And so the ability for a group or an owner or an operator in this space to really provide the ability for clinicians to keep doing what they do well and find another path to wealth, I found was really an important sort of calling that we wanted to reach out to from a perspective of why we structured Inspire the way we did. And the key to that is doing a couple of things differently, and among those things is providing a path to equity, which I'll speak to in a moment. Prior to my time in the veterinary medicine sector, I spent about 20 to 25 years in operations, digital communications, worked with some large brands that you will know and will have heard of, and operated and opened a ton of units, built field leadership teams, built organizational structures that allow us to scale and grow. And I bring that background to Inspire and the ability for us to integrate units and work with teams that are experienced, either veterinary professionals or operators that know how to run businesses at scale that are distributed across the US. But again, consolidation not being new to our space, it's been underway for a while. There are a number of groups that are buying or opening up and have de novo opening strategies within the veterinary sector. And it's a space that's only about 20% consolidated today. There are more than 20,000 veterinary clinics in the US that are still privately owned. It's an industry that continues to grow year after year, decade after decade. We see pet spending increasing year over year. We're buying Halloween costumes for our pets now these days. The amount of services and offerings we have to care for pets continues to grow. We're going deep into specialties like oncology. We're going even into holistic care, acupuncture, chiropractic, all sorts of things that didn't exist 10 years ago. Among the things that are new to the space is this concept of wellness and pets seeing their vet once or twice a year, emulating that human model. And that's also driven the industry toward this idea that we want to have a primary care provider, a relationship with a vet, keep our pets healthy, and that preventive care is now proven, and we have the data to show that does extend life expectancy. We also have the data to show that having pets in the household improves the quality of life of the human being. So it's really a feel-good profession. It's a principled profession, both from a standpoint of those clinicians I talked about and the folks that work within it that are doing well by doing good. If we look at the business outlook and where we're going, again, a relationship between the pet owner and the clinician that's really all about life expectancy and getting all the benefits out of owning pets. We saw out of COVID and the buying patterns of millennials that pet ownership is not only here to stay, it really skyrocketed during COVID where we saw the shelters empty out, which was a lovely thing for those of us that don't want to see pets come to harm in shelters. We saw out of that a growth within the pet industry that we're comping against now. So we see visits are about flat across the industry. We look at the buying patterns and the visit patterns every 2 to 3 to 5 to 10 years. Even if we see some of those troughs, the industry continues to grow year over year, decade over decade. And it's an industry that continues to benefit from some of the things I talked about earlier, where there's an awareness around keeping our pets healthy. From a standpoint of where Inspire comes from and what we wanted to do a little differently, we didn't want to emulate some of the models that are wonderful and well-meaning if you think about the PE space and what they're doing to buy hospitals. Many of them are doing great things and growing and recapping and some of the things that are happening out in the traditional ownership space of consolidation are fine. But what they don't come with and what they don't allow is a long-term outlook toward creating a different path for veterinary professionals and taking advantage of some of the business impact of what that path can be. So we very decidedly early on knew we wanted to go into a pubco structure to allow ourselves to use that as a funding tool. We also knew that tied to that we wanted to have an ESOP in place, which is unheard of in our space. We know it's common across every other sector that we all know of. It's very, very rare in the veterinary services side that we would see that kind of equity sharing or an ESOP be in place in terms of the veterinary professional, the veterinarian working in a hospital. We knew very early on we wanted to have that, not only for the altruistic reasons of wanting to share the wealth and give these folks a bite of the apple, so to speak, but also use that as a competitive advantage in a world where we really have 0% unemployment for the veterinary professional. As fast as the business is growing, we need to graduate more vets, we need to keep vets longer, and a group that can do that has mechanisms in place to keep vets 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, that's automatically a competitive advantage. And the vet staying longer with the practice means longer relationship with their client, that primary care provider relationship that really we value. It also means that we get more earning out of them over those years because a vet's time equals production. So there's some altruistic reasons why we want to share equity. There's also some business factors that come along with that give a team that can engage folks through another wealth building tool the ability to keep vets longer. So we decided to take a very different approach. We're the only services company in our sector that will have an ESOP structure as part of its organizational structure and share equity in that way. There's no other group in the services side that does that. Some milestones that I spoke of earlier in terms of things that have happened in the last handful of months. The IPO that we took out in August. And following that IPO, about 3 weeks ago, we closed on our 14th acquisition, which is in the state of Pennsylvania. Another thing that is a differentiator for us from a standpoint of how we grow and how we buy is we look at veterinary hospitals in a very geographically agnostic way. So we are in Hawaii, California, Florida, Texas, Massachusetts, Colorado. We truly are nationwide. And we take geography out of the mix. We're able to do that because we have a distributed workforce of leaders and consultants and teams we work with. And looking at all 50 states really allows us to say no to a lot of acquisitions. We might say no to them because they don't pencil from a buying perspective, or there might not be a cultural leadership fit. So as we look at deals, and we have 10 deals or so we're looking at any one time, we can say no to about 90% of those and go to LOI in about 10% of those deals. Taking geography out of the mix allows us to do that. We are continuing to grow and continuing to acquire. We have deals that we're working on now with the goal, as you look at our 5-year plan, of about 10 hospitals per year, very handily being part of our growth path. And I don't want to use words like easy, but that's a very doable number for us to buy and integrate and continue to grow that horizontal growth with. We did 10 acquisitions in the year before our IPO went out, and that was with half the infrastructure we have today. And so we know we have the capability to do that. We've added to the team. We have acumen on this team we didn't have then, and that'll be the run rate for the next handful of years coming, is acquiring at about 10 per year. In terms of some other things that are sort of central to the way we do things and how we buy differently, just a few highlights here. Because we're buying for long term, we look at valuations a bit differently than the other private equity consolidators in our space. We don't use tools like trailing 12s. We look 3 years back. We use a 3-year adjusted net profit figure to build our valuations off of. And those valuations are quite a bit more conservative than they are in the private equity space, where there's some buying of revenue and some rolling over that when they recap. So we're taking a longer term outlook to these hospitals, buying profitable hospitals, hospitals that when we work with debt partners service their own debt flow. And so these deals pencil for us and we look at that 3-year outlook. So it's a little different way of looking at hospitals. It's also a different way of integrating them after we purchase them. So we have a lot of involvement between our team and the hospital team coming on to Inspire, much more than a lot of other groups use. And one of the reasons for that is we're going to be with them for many, many years. We want to make sure that's a fit. We want to make sure there's a cultural fit and that we can continue to grow that hospital. And those touches from our acquisition team or our medicine team include a town hall that I conduct personally with every hospital that we buy, just to really get in and get to know teams and make sure that all the scary things about being bought by a corporation are addressed and taken care of. And we have folks that are ready to continue to be really a producing team and a well-oiled team post-purchase. We get some of those things out of the way that can sometimes come with being acquired. So we want to remain sensitive to the fact that this is an industry that as it's consolidating, there are some specters out there, what it means to be bought up by corporate. We're trying to attack those things by having a really personal relationship with each of our hospitals. That's something that isn't being done very broadly. Talked about some of these advantages already in terms of sort of what we do differently and the relationships we leverage. There's a lot of acumen within our team in vet med and in operations and the other disciplines. We need to really make sure these hospitals are supported. I'll talk more deeply about team in a slide or two as I wrap up. But among the things that we bring to the way in which we assess hospitals and purchase hospitals is a lot of us coming out of veterinary medicine understand the industry. Even those of us that are lay people and non-clinicians have lived and worked with clinicians, and we understand the debt challenges. We understand that we're an industry that has an enormous emotional and physical burden to the folks that have to practice every day. Very, very bright individuals that are doing a lot of diagnosing on any given day. And there's a support system these folks need. There's development these folks need. There is a team of folks that these folks need around them to really be successful. We have to think about that in everything from labor models to how we grow them, what their CE looks like, what their ongoing career pathing looks like, and the equity I spoke of earlier. So those of us that are coming out of the industry understanding that better really allows us to have that competitive advantage of a team being integrated into Inspire that knows we're there for the long haul. And we found that really resonates with sellers. They care about where their legacy is going, allows us to really integrate with those teams well, and they feel good about that sale. As I talked about team and I talked about attracting talent and retaining them, I want to talk about the team that's here to support the hospitals as they continue to grow. We've got a very distributed group of folks outside of the four walls of Inspire in terms of the experts we put together to help us continue to scale and grow. They were present with us pre-IPO, they're present with us now. We divide disciplines like legal into 3 different groups. So we have acquisitions legal, corporate legal, securities legal, all working very efficiently to help us continue to grow. We built a machine that's ready to scale and allow us to buy those 10 hospitals per year and integrate them. We also have that internal leadership team that I spoke of earlier that allows us to really understand the hospitals once we bought them. It allows us to hit some of the milestones we want to hit. So ours is really a consultative model. It's a model where we work with hospitals in which we know that they have a primary care provider relationship and they are that hospital on Main and Main Street. And there's an existing relationship between them and their clientele that Inspire doesn't need to come in and disrupt. We can make changes in terms of bringing in technology, bringing in group buying, bringing some efficiencies into the system without rebranding these hospitals and making them corporate hospitals. And that's another thing that really resonates with clients and allows teams to continue to have that relationship they have with the local clients they serve. So it's about being sensitive to some of those pieces as we come and work with the hospital. As I mentioned earlier, we're at 14 hospitals now with the addition of Pennsylvania a couple weeks ago. About a $19 million run rate, about $5 million of real estate under ownership. And that's another differentiator for us when you compare us to some of the other groups in the consolidation space. Because we're going to buy and hold long term, we buy real estate, about 8 out of 10 deals we do. So we own land and building for the capabilities that gives us to add that benefit to the balance sheet, but also expand hospitals, knock out a wall, add an exam room, continue to grow the physical plant. And we found we can do that because, again, we're going to hold longer, and that's something that other consolidators don't look at. Spoke about experienced leadership earlier, and we have a group of folks that come from a variety of industries, private and public companies that are selected and have been here either since founding or since we've continued to grow Inspire, that are here for the long haul to help us grow this company. A lot of acumen, a lot of experience, a lot of mission-driven folks that are working both in our operations and management team, but also on our board, which is a wonderfully skilled and functional team that give us a lot of background and skill set to help us continue to scale and make good decisions. Among those 2 folks are 2 founders, myself and Stith Kaiser. Both of us collectively have about 40 years of veterinary medicine experience, coming from families that are rife with veterinary skill set, owners and operators of hospitals, managers at scale. We really bring a background that where we know an industry and we're used to working with clinicians, doctors, understanding some of the contradictions of our space. It gives us a lot of pride to work in such a mission-driven, principled profession and help some of the folks we work with grow. As we've chosen talent and continue to grow and add folks to this team, we've attracted folks from some really wonderful blue chip companies and folks that have been through the move of private to public and have managed at scale, like myself and others have. And so again, we're building a team that understands what it's like to operate across 50 states, or in many cases, global companies, and a team that really understands that we have to build systems today to help us grow. And I'm very proud of the fact we've got some really skilled leaders in our team. We'll continue to add to that team. We'll make very responsible adds as we grow, but we're a pretty lean organization. There's about 13 folks in what we would call the office today. We will probably never have a headquarters. We don't need that overhead. We are distributed throughout the U.S., and we will be really focused on supporting the hospitals in the hospitals where they work. So from a standpoint of where we spend our money, it'll be on great talent, systems, processes, certainly the acquisition of hospitals, but we don't need to have a headquarters or spend a lot of money on infrastructure that isn't really necessary to support these hospitals as they grow. Where we're going will be that 10 unit per year run rate, and we may be able to grow faster than that. We want to be responsible with that growth and do it in a way that we can integrate hospitals really well and meaningfully. We may get into a place, as we are now from an assessment perspective, already some things we're looking at, where we begin to take some small groups out. So that 2, that 3, that 5 hospital practice, we start to be their exit. We can buy multiple hospitals at one time instead of individually. We're getting to a scale and we're looking at the types of deals where that's meaningful and possible for us. We've already begun to expand in terms of the type of hospitals we purchase. Traditionally, consolidators have been in what we call general practice hospitals, which is a little broader than it would be in the human world that we're all used to. Even a general practice hospital in the veterinary medical profession is a really broad list of services those doctors are capable of providing. We've begun to branch out from GP already in the form of some equine practice that we serve. We may go into specialty, emergency, and some other alternative care as we continue to grow. We have the ability to do that because, again, that long-term outlook allows us to do that. And with that, I'll take whatever questions you have.
Thanks, people. I appreciate it. Very informative. I can open for questions. Anybody have a question they'd like to offer? If not, I will start. All right. As far as integrating acquisitions, I can only imagine that a lot of the smaller clinics are not technology forward. How difficult is it to actually integrate those into your platforms?
It's a great question, and sometimes we'd be surprised. Even the small clinics are pretty technology forward, amazingly. Common in our space now is electronic medical records, maybe more common than it has been in human medicine up until the last few years. They may not always be on the same system, and one of the things they go through when they become an Inspire practice is within about 90 days, we bring them to the same EMR. So today I could dial in, I can see every case in every one of our hospitals nationwide. Our medical team can as well, and they can do things like case review and coach, and they can look at results, throughput and production numbers, and all sorts of things we can measure and look at. And we also have the ability to bring technology in the form of shared data, which we've done, and bring buying patterns and buying decisions and using shared networking tools in terms of how we purchase and getting some real buying power from the standpoint of having one centralized purchasing network. That's underway as well. And the clinics are much more malleable to that than we might otherwise realize, because in the veterinary world, they're used to using technology on a pretty regular basis. Even some of the smaller clinics that maybe aren't operating off of iPads and using AI yet, they're pretty flexible to that because it's a pretty technological profession.
Just as a follow-up question, in terms of integrating Pennsylvania, for instance, since you're just getting to that market, it's a big farm community as well, the state, I should say, not community, but the state. Are you looking to get into the farm animal side of the vet clinics, and how much different is that than your pet clinic, so to speak?
It's an interesting question. We've talked about that, and sometimes bovine comes up. Short answer is we've got some of that acumen within our team. We could. When you get into livestock management and some of those, that's a completely different, pun intended, animal altogether. It's a different sort of revenue model. It's a different sort of working with the client. You're now managing herds. You're managing for maybe USDA requirements and some things that aren't part of what we do daily today. The answer is not no, because we do have some of the folks on our team that have worked in that area. It's easier to say equine is easy to put into that mix, and that's been wonderful in our one hospital that has about a third of their business in equine. And we treat exotics at every hospital we're in. So based on what a doctor is comfortable doing, we'll see the ferret, the bird, the lizard. Those are already part of our mix.
Great. Again, looking at Pennsylvania, even New York for that matter, since these are relatively new markets for you, what expansion possibilities do you see? I'm sure that you've got a pipeline of potentials that come across your plate. And you talk about cultural fit. Where do you stop looking at a company or a vet clinic because culturally they're not there, and then secondly, they're just not big enough?
Yeah. Well, the big enough comes pretty quickly because we look at 3 years of financials almost immediately after a clinic is introduced to us. We start to get a sense of scale and whether or not there's enough profit and earnings there. Excuse me. And the culture comes out, and the high touch I talked about earlier in terms of the amount of time we spend integrating with a practice during the weeks of due diligence, which is about 90 days for us. We have a lot more conversation than other groups do. One of the reasons for that is we want to work with this team for years and years to come, and so it's not as easy to sort of say, hey, we'll only have to work with them for 12 or 24 months, let's buy the revenue and we'll deal with the headache for 2 years. We want to really have a good relationship during that time. And the things that culturally may come up that sort of become some disqualifiers are, if that really scary word change causes a lot of consternation in a team, and they're really going to say, hey, we don't want to grow, we don't want to modify, we don't think we can do some things in terms of purchasing or some other things to be a little more efficient, that's a signal to us that maybe this is a group that doesn't want to think from an enterprise perspective. We'll probably back away from those deals.
Nice. And then
a question right here.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I saw that your burn was like $250,000 a month. what's your run rate? And in your acquisition formula, where does your bandwidth come from to acquire? Is it an equity swap? Is it debt issuance? Where would the pool for acquisition?
Yeah. So on run rate, we have some tools in place to make sure that as we achieve a plan to, if we work our plan properly, we have to execute in the ways we need to execute. By the end of Q2, we should be at break even. So both through vertical growth, through cash sources that we have, and through what we need to do in terms of acquisitive growth. Q2 is that time frame by which we want to be break even. We've worked that math. And that is a relative handful of hospitals. It's not going to be long for us to get to that number. We have to execute to get there. From a standpoint of, what was the second part of your question? So sorry.
Your acquisition
We've got an internal team that does a really nice job of working with the sources in terms of how hospitals come to us and assess whether or not hospitals are a fit. And increasingly, we're starting to get referrals from hospitals and sellers who have worked with us or know us, where the leads are coming organically. So from a standpoint of where they come and being sourced from.
equity line base? Do you have like a
Yeah, so
debt issuance?
yeah, we do. So typically equity is part of a deal, and it's probably about a third of each of the deals we do, maybe growing now that we're out and achieve that offering. There is also a structure tied to that equity, which has a restriction tied to it, because we want to have some skin in the game on the part of those owners. There's also a holdback in the form of the cash that comes with the deal. So we typically will keep an owner on contract for about 2 years, longer if we can get it, because we want that primary care provider relationship to be maintained. And there's some holdback tied to results being maintained post-sale, so that there's more cash for the seller when they achieve those targets in the years after the sale, so that there's, again, that skin in the game, also exemplified by and tied to the restricted nature of the stock they have in part of the deal, which again tends to be about a third of the deal.
I got another quick for you. In terms of states you're in now, what attractive states are there that you're not in yet? Because I'm sure, like in the Midwest, for instance, there's a number of states. Where do you go? Where do you want to go?
That question's almost more easily answered where we will go, but there's a couple we don't love as much. And I bet everyone can probably guess the number one, and we have a hospital there, it's California, but that's very manageable. Ironically, the most difficult state to operate in, and we are about to be there, is New York. New York has some interesting language in their Veterinary Practice Act that if you misinterpret it, you've got to really watch out how you operate in terms of what one is licensed or not licensed to do. I've operated in that space for years and years. I know it well. Our leader of medicine, she and I worked together in a past life. We know the rules and regs. We know how to operate there. You got to really know your stuff. Beyond that, it's really, we like 49 states. We can really operate everywhere. Some states having some advantages, some DMAs having some advantages. We have 4 hospitals in Florida now. We'll add a 5th very soon. Florida's a great state for us. So we'll continue to infill.
Any other questions that we have from the audience? If not, there is a breakout session, as Kimball said earlier, as I said as well. We're outside these doors, so please address them with him, with Kimball. Thank you, opportunity. Thank you very much.
With more than 6,000 small and micro-cap companies listed, if you're looking for the next Apple, then ChannelCheck truly is your trade. It's an investor community where you can access independent Wall Street research, advanced market data, balanced news, corporate videos, and podcasts. You can even register to attend in-person Meet the Management Series lunches, and to be part of the preeminent annual Small and Micro-Cap Investor Conference, NobleCon. And here's the best news. Since ChannelCheck is sponsored by the featured companies, premium membership requires no investment. It's absolutely free. So check it out. Log in today. Find out why ChannelCheck is North America's leading source of research on the companies that just may change the world.